Hello, I'm Jim Lampley. Welcome to this edition of TFG Overtime. This is going to be fun. We've got both Max Kellerman and Bernard Hopkins here on the set for a free-ranging discussion of boxing. And Max, I want to start with something that you said at the end of our live telecast of Miguel Cotto's knockout of Daniel Geale Saturday night, when you said that the public had been robbed for a couple of years in the middle of Cotto's career of the best of Cotto, and the name you brought up was Antonio Margarito. Elaborate on what you were thinking at that moment.
It's obvious to most that Margarito cheated Cotto out of his destiny, with the plaster wraps. And remember what Larry Merchant, as Cotto was coming up and fighting in the early fights on HBO, Larry said something like, there's some gaddy in him, in Cotto. In other words, he was promoted as this unstoppable force and this elite pound-for-pound fighter, but he had some vulnerability to him, which made him even more fan-friendly. He would get off the deck, and being a get-up fighter was part of his identity. And then against Margarito, a fight he's boxing and winning, all of a sudden, he's getting broken down in this unnatural way. I mean, it happened very quickly. 5th and 6th, 7th round, suddenly it was like, whoa, that was an accumulation of punishment that just seemed to happen all of a sudden. How does that work? And eventually, Cotto's kneeling before Margarito, succumbing, acquiescing, will broken. For a get-up fighter to be broken like that publicly in the most public way, in the biggest fight of his career, that was something that, forget about the physical damage, he's getting hit with bricks. The psychological damage, the emotional damage, it seems to me, took years to overcome. And Bernard, if he doesn't run into Freddie Roach, maybe he never overcomes it.
Well, I don't think he would have. And also, I mean, when you see that Margarito fight and Cotto fight, either Margarito was a special fighter that night, doing what he did to Cotto, as Max said, or something was wrong. And we realized, and it came out what was wrong. Cotto never been in a position like that because he never faced a guy that had power and was punching away. He felt that he was getting hit like somebody had a cast or a bat. When you hear a fighter says that, either that guy is legitimate or there's something around the corner that's not good that you need to find out. And we all, in the world of boxing, of course, know what that was. I mean, Freddie Roach now being involved with Cotto, you can see the maturity that's there, but you can also see where Freddie Roach is bringing the best out of Cotto. He's bringing the jab, he's bringing the left hook. The things that Cotto started off his career with early in the pros and then in the middle, and those great moments he had in his early career, you're starting to see them manifest right now. And it's at a perfect time with the Canelo and Cotto fight starting to now to get to the point of conversation is done and it's going to happen. That spells perfect situation for boxing fans.
I think Freddie Roach is an amazing trainer, but you didn't have to be a genius to recognize that Miguel Cotto's weapon was his left hook to the body. It made him so special early in his career. And for some reason, after the Margarito fight, that punch seemed to go away for 2 or 3 years. So what is it about the chemistry between a trainer and a fighter that Freddie is the one who's able to say to him the obvious, bring back your weapon, and it comes back?
Because a trainer would train you to do certain things, but a teacher will remind you of those things. And Freddie Roach, I look at as a teacher that will remind you of the things that got you where you've been and where you're at now, and what makes you great. And Freddie got him back to that. And Cotto respects him so much, he listened to him, and he wants to please him. Yeah,
I think that's key. He was in Pacquiao's corner when Pacquiao beat up Cotto. So Cotto's seeing that guy, that coach, help train another guy to beat him and beat him up legitimately, no plaster in his wraps. So Freddie has that kind of credibility with Cotto. And then also sometimes versatility and a well-rounded skill set can be a curse in disguise. Just because a guy can box doesn't mean he always should box. And Cotto, because he had a versatile, skilled, deep amateur background, liked to box at times, especially after the emotional trauma of the Margarito fight. And this happened to Tommy Hearns after he was knocked out by Sugar Ray Leonard. He moved up to junior middleweight. He said, I don't want to be known as the Hitman anymore. I want to be known as the Motor City Cobra. I'm going to be a boxer. And he had a couple fights like that, and everyone was like, bring back the Hitman. And Emmanuel Stewart had to get in his head and say, come on, time to bring back the Hitman. And that really revived Hearns' career. And that's what Freddie did to Cotto. He got back in his head and said, I know you can box. He even said it after the first round of the Geale fight. Yeah, you're boxing fine. Go get this guy.
You know what, Jim? Sometimes it seems a relationship brings the best out of both people or bring the best out of that one person need to be motivated. That relationship that Freddie Roach and Miguel Cotto have seems to be, well, it is in front of us, is really a perfect fit and a perfect match.
And here's an amazing part of that. I asked Miguel last week, what was plan B if Freddie had said no, and Miguel said there was no plan B. Freddie had to say yes. So as fans, we're all thrilled that he did. Now, you heard me say to Max during the show, TFG, that if David Lemieux could somehow emerge at a level close to where GGG, Cotto, and Canelo already are, we begin to have something that might replicate the four kings of the 80s. What's your feeling about that?
I feel strong about that it's going to be exciting. They might not be the name of the 80s, of course, but the fireworks will be there. And that's what's important, at least right now in that division in boxing, amongst the fans who's thirsty for great fights, good fights, action fights. Out of those three names that we have a chemistry to make a mini tournament or a lasting fight-by-fight with the middleweight division being down up for grabs for those 3 or 4 names. And that's exciting itself. Being in the middleweight division for 12-plus years, I'm excited that the middleweight division is in a position that is now, rather than any other division, like a middleweight division, then you have the heavyweight division, and then you have the other divisions. This division is alive and well.
That's historically what middleweights have always been.
Yeah, it's alive and well.
Yeah.
Tony
Zale and
middleweights,
Graziano.
because of their relative size compared to, say, welterweights and lightweights and featherweights, and the strength that they bring, are middleweights the best all-around athletes in boxing?
I think the middleweight division is the middle of good of the heavyweights and then also the smaller guys. I think the middle set says what it says, and it means what it means because you're in the middle and you get the best of both worlds. And the great fights that happens in boxing is in the middleweight, welterweight, that the middle division makes great fights.
I think that's what you usually hear is like the heavyweights are strong and slow, and the flyweights are fast, but they don't hit as hard. But but I also think that it's just like there's a scientific answer here. You can plot a population on a bell curve. You know, some people are really small, some people are really big, most people fall somewhere in the middle. The average American male is 180 pounds or something like that. That's the middleweight. You train down to 160. So from the largest pool of people, you have the largest pool of fighters, and therefore the most competition to get to the top, and therefore the best fighters once you get there. And they've generally produced throughout the history of boxing great action fights. Now we say Hagler-Hearns. In the old days, they used to say Zale and Graziano, and those are all middleweight fights.
Guys, great conversation. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for being with us on this edition of TFG Overtime.